James, what you're hitting us with?
So obviously, the people that don't know, Andrew's been coming across to Northern Ireland. We've been running workshops and seminars. So Andrew's been doing the sort of nutritional elements, what's the right strategies. And we've had some
Mm.
amazing topics. We've had highly educated individuals in those rooms coming to receive that information, and from like dietitians to people in science, doctors, with the different people, high end athletes attending these seminars and workshops. I'm doing the training side of things, biomechanics, talking about anatomy, function, all those things, and then some of the psychology to just make sure people are improving what they're doing to get as much out of everything that they do. So one of the topics that we actually had, I thought this was quite interesting because again, it popped up with a client in the gym the other day had asked me this in terms of off-season strategies, and I
Okay.
referenced the information that you had on the seminar, and I thought that that's quite a good topic. So the question that'll lead on to your answer is, what does the science say about caloric metrics in off-season in terms of accumulating muscle? So we talked about surplus from like maintenance, 5% and 15% surplus, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what? This is a great question. It really, really is. So,
Yeah.
um, context sake on this one, right? In terms of building muscle mass, the amount of muscle mass that someone can typically build as a beginner, and I think this is important to understand, is something in the region around about between 1 to maybe 2.5 kilograms within 6 to 12 months. If you're an absolute beginner. And then it goes like a bouncy ball. You throw the bouncy ball down an alleyway, it bounces high the first time, and it gets diminishing returns in terms of its height. By the time you've been training for 5 years, you're talking about a total muscle mass accumulation of maybe something in the region of about 5 or 6 kilograms, right? So 2.5 the first year, maybe 1.5 the second year, then one, then half, right? So the total amount's about 5 kilos. Now that's maybe the average or the median,
So
because
no,
I also
hold on.
showed,
So you said it's 2.5 kilo the first year, and then after that it would be zero point 0.5.
and no, eventually you end up at zero point 0.5.
Yes.
It might be 2.5 or two, and then it might be 1.5, and then one. But it goes down, but it's diminishing returns is a long
Yeah.
story short.
Sure.
And at about 5 years, you're probably talking between 5, 6 kilograms, something like that, right? So on average, maybe a kilo a year. Now, again, average. Some people do better, some people do way worse
Yeah.
than all of that. But by the time you've been training for a while, and if you're a competitive bodybuilder or you're just a bodybuilder, by virtue of the fact that you're doing this thing, you're already in the top bracket for adding muscle mass anyway, because otherwise you wouldn't be doing it, right?
Yeah.
Because unless you had a penchant for adding muscle. In any case, you're talking diminishing returns. And then so the question is how much energy surplus do you need to add that kilogram of muscle within a year? Well, if you break it down in a year, you're adding what, less than 100 grams a month. And if you break it down from less than 100 grams a month, then actually you're adding probably less than 10 grams a day of muscle mass. So how much calories do you think you need in excess to add 10 grams of tissue to your body a day? Well, actually, the answer to this question is actually very, very small. Um, Now, the data, or rather the recommendations on calorie surpluses, I think were based around this sort of notion of what you need to lose weight, which is probably some in the region between 1,000 to 500 calorie deficit. Take the 500 calorie, and then you'll lose your half a kilogram a week. Well, that data was just sort of flipped and went, well, probably just add 500 calories to the diet rather than take it away. And that's what you see in textbooks for years. But it's remarkably poorly studied, remarkably poorly. I mean, there's less than a handful of studies that have actually looked at this. And I presented data on this along with anecdotal data at the previous webinar that we did. And I'll just bring some of this up because I know you'll like it. But my experience is if you try and bulk, you inevitably you just get fat. You don't actually really add much in the way of muscle at all. Is that kind of your experience with it just before I get into this, James?
Yeah, that nails it down absolutely perfectly.
So here's a training study on this one here. In fact, here's some examples of this. Me 2019, 2022, 2025, 99 kilograms, 95 kilograms, 92 kilograms. Every single year, well, at my heaviest versus at my lightest on stage, never got any bigger. In fact, being a lighter weight was better for me because the amount of muscle mass you're actually adding is so small, right? And this is a study by Gary Slater et al. Um, estimating the amount of calorific requirement needed for a kilogram of muscle. And they reckon that you're probably talking around about 36 to 48 calories extra in the diet per day for 100 for 100 grams of muscle. So 36 calories to 50 calories on top of what your maintenance is.
Yeah,
Tiny,
that's crazy.
tiny, right? And like I say, you're adding 100 grams in a year if you're lucky, right? But let me show you again some less high-end concepts. This visually shows it really nice. So this is a 7-week study, progressive overload, 17 participants, 3 different diets, maintenance diet, a 5% calorie surplus diet, 15% calorie surplus diet, right? 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight, at least 20% of calories coming from fat, at least 40% of calories coming from carbs, right? So it's not a perfect study. It's not exactly matched, right? It's only 7 weeks, but that's still within the window that you're getting of adding muscle mass, right? Um, and you're talking novice to advanced trainer, so you've got a mix there. So some people will do better than others on this, right? And then they're randomized to groups. And what you see, if you just look at the graphic on the far right, the amount of muscle mass accumulation across all 3 different categories is the same.
Yep.
We all gain the same amount of muscle on average. On average, some do better, some do worse. Just the average, right? There's always exceptions, but we've got to work with the average. But the other thing you notice, which is in the red, is the fat. And if you've got a 5% calorie surplus or a 15% calorie surplus, you gain more fat than if you just stay at maintenance and you don't get any more muscle mass, right? And this study here is consistent with other studies I've seen on bulking. And again, I think if you are, again, to give it some context, if you're an absolute noob and you've never lifted a weight before, your ability to accumulate muscle mass is high. So you do have a demand for more energy. But if you've been training for a while and you're going to an off season, you're talking about what you're talking about, someone that's done a full season of training, etc., just doesn't make any sense. And we often talk about this context of the post-show rebound, super absorbent to adding muscle mass and all that. It's nonsense.
No.
All you're doing in that post-show period is reaccumulating the muscle mass that you potentially lost.
Yep.
That's all that's happening there. And you've maybe learned to be more adherent to a diet. You've maybe got better at your training. And it's those things that maybe allow you to have a better response when you post exercise because you're sort of post contest than any sort of magic bullet that's happening around being extra anabolic. There is one scenario though where you will be super anabolic though, James, after you have had a massive body composition change. And do you know what that is?
Weight gain.
No, 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 no. You've just given birth.
Oh yeah.
If you are pregnant and you birth a child, as soon as you lose that child, sorry, you lose that child, you birth that child, your body is in a highly anabolic responsive situation to add muscle mass to get you back to where you go. What have you?
Well, actually,
So there you go.
the fathers tend to be less anabolic because testosterone quite often depletes after they've had a newborn child.
Yes, and I've heard that is
There's some
because of
evidence
an
on that.
evolutionary
Yeah.
reason for that is because there's some sort of psychosomatic thing goes on where your status changes and your role changes, where
Yeah.
you become more estrogenic. So you're not being that hunter-gatherer, you're being more of a carer.
Yeah.
So you're programmed for a dad bod. You can't help it.
Sure. So I think like whenever we're sort of considering people talking about that post-show rebound, and this is where you're in this anabolic state,
Yeah,
you're going to be able to accumulate loads of muscle tissue. As you said, I always break down, I think no matter what, how clean your strategy is or how scientific, you probably have lost at least some muscle tissue
yeah,
to
yeah,
varying degrees, depending on the process that you've utilized, time frame, aggressiveness of
yeah,
that process.
yeah.
So uh, the first phase for me is recovery phase, particularly if you've
Yes,
got somebody into really low level body fat. It
yeah,
is trying to get them back to maintenance immediately with spending occasional days in surplus as well. Allow that weight gain to come back on that body.
yeah,
And also try to bring the hormones back into an optimal space. At that point, and only at that point, are you in a prime position to pack on tissue. So the post show, I don't think is a really good time for accruing fresh tissue. It's
yeah,
better to get your hormones into a good position. We throw words around like optimal all the time whenever we're in off
yeah,
season building muscle. And then the same people that say that are saying that they're building loads of tissue in this post-show rebound whenever they are not in an optimal hormonal position. So
yeah,
everything they say is conflicting. What we do need to understand is, particularly in natural bodybuilding, recovery is key. Starting to have that premeditation. How am I going to behave from a social perspective
yeah,
with food consumption? How am I going to just try to get nice sort of life balance back into my life? All those things are really important, and they're also nurturing to bring those hormones back into life. Once they're in play, then you're probably in a good space to start pushing programming, adding in more volume, and accumulate more frequency on weak body parts, etc. Too.
yeah. No, 100%. That I agree with absolutely everything there. Only thing I think is worth adding is in that post-show period, you're also incredibly vulnerable from an injury
Yeah,
perspective. So pushing your body in terms of trying to accrue that new muscle, that's danger zone
yeah,
there. And I know I've hurt myself in that post-show period thinking that I was in a rebound phase and I wouldn't recommend it because it's like a beginner lifting weights for the first time. Literally anything you do will cause you to get back to where you were
yeah,
in that peak off season. Just going to the gym and lifting, your performance will just increase week on week. So you don't have to smash yourself. Just
yeah.
small progress. But yeah, I think that I just wanted to add that. But I totally agree with you. And yeah, I think the nurturing point you made was an important one as well about getting a good social aspect back as nurturing to allow you to facilitate that recovery.
Yeah. Let's discuss then the adverse effects of extreme weight gain in off season. I can say that I have done it intentionally once. Again, like it's okay reading literature, but they actually put stuff in the application. You've done it yourself, and you can sort of observe, right? Where did I feel best? What actually yielded the best results? Which is really important because this is a time game. You know what I mean? We're all running out of time to find our best ever look. So, what would be the adverse effects then of extreme weight gain in off season? So even if it did yield slightly more muscle tissue than maintenance or a 5% surplus, that extreme surplus, if it yields more fat aggregation, then what negative effects could we see with that?
Okay, that's a great question. And it reminds me of an anecdote. I'll not name him. I think he's thick. And I don't mean thick in terms of dimensionally. I think he's fucking stupid,
Right.
right? I remember the post he put up saying, I would happily add 60, 70, 80 pounds of fat if it meant I was getting another 2 pounds of muscle. I was like, well, you're not going to get that, mate, because the study that I've just shown you, that is the dumbest thing I think I've read. You're a natural bodybuilder. Anyway, what are the negatives of these things? Well, the point you made there was time frames. So it all goes on, all this fat, it's all got to come off.
Yep.
So at some point it's got to come off. If it takes you 20 weeks to put that fat on, it's going to take you 20 weeks to take it off. So it means you're extending any dietary period that you're doing there from just a purely practical perspective. You could, and as a consequence of that, you get diet fatigue over the course of a longer period of time. that means you're also shortening the period of time that you've got to potentially build the muscle, because dieting is a catabolic process, and building muscle while you're in a calorie deficit is incredibly hard.
Yep.
I've discussed that before. So you're shortening the window you've got for anabolism just by increasing the length of time you've got for catabolism on there like that. Two different phases you can talk about here. You've got the acute phase and the post-show period there. If you rapidly gain too much weight in the post-show period, you can end up with things like refeeding syndrome. And refeeding syndrome is the sort of thing that can occur in humanitarian crises. So if you go into like a famine zone or a war zone or something like that, and you've got people who have been starving to death,
Yep.
or if you take someone who's been a hunger striker or someone like this, and you just smash them full of calories again, what can happen is their electrolyte balance just goes all over the place as a consequence of this. And because electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chlorine, magnesium, etc., are involved in this process we call saltatory conduction, you can end up having like heart arrhythmias and things like that,
Yep.
cardiac arrest, right? Absolute disaster, right? And you die. And that's what happened to a lot of the victims of the Holocaust, right? Second World War, or the Dutch famine as well in the Second World War. So these things happen, right? In bodybuilding, I've seen guys gain 2 stone in a week. I've seen guys gain thick, stupid, right? Um, Pure bravado, compete with each other to see how much weight they can gain in the post-show context, egg each other on again, and end up in hospital again, gaining 2 stone, right? Just ridiculous, pure gluttony, disgusting behavior, right?
Yep.
Now, again, moving away from the acute stuff, which is obvious. In the long term, it's just unhealthy, James. It's
Yep.
just incredibly unhealthy, right? So we're talking about that catabolism, length of period of diet is long. You just will lose muscle dieting for a period of time. The longer you diet for it, the harder it is. But you're talking about not feeling healthy within yourself, right? So probably high blood pressure, right? So just if you've ever had higher than normal blood pressure, you know what that feels like. I was 99 kilograms at one point. For a guy that's 5'7", that is too heavy. Um, Pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes. I know I talked about the other day there about insulin resistance and things like that, but you don't want to set yourself up for that. Issues around triglycerides and blood lipids, okay, around that. So you're setting yourself up for atherosclerosis. And if you've got a habit, or rather, if you've got a history of heart disease, etc., within your family, then you've got to be wary and mindful of this. And I'm sure, again, many of you who are listening to this are natural bodybuilders, but the non-natural bodybuilders that might find their way on this podcast, a lot of them die of cardiac arrests. They die of myocardial infarctions. Massive body weight, massive increase in the amount of fluid in their body, taking anabolic steroids, increasing their atherosclerotic plaques, along with poor cholesterol profiles. They end up with kidney issues, heart issues, blood pressure issues. So those are all issues accumulated with them. You can end up with gastrointestinal issues as well. Um, Around this, lack of fitness, poor joint health as well. Changes just in the biomechanical profile. Just because you've got more weight around your waist, you will move differently when you squat, when you deadlift, etc. On here again, leaving you more open to injuries. Self-esteem, and there are differences between men and women. What men, guys are like, yeah, I like being big. Women, not quite the same. They have got different sort of perceptions around what their ideal should be, and typically they want to be a little bit lighter and not as large. So I've painted a fairly dire picture, and there's many things that I probably have missed off in this list. I don't know if you've got anything to add, but it doesn't sound good, right? And when you get to 29, 30, 31, you start thinking about this sort of stuff. You don't
Yeah.
think about it when you're young. When you're getting older, you do.
There's a couple other little sidelines on this as well. So we look at skin integrity, which is
Oh
obviously,
yeah, that was just on the back. I was just about to say it. You're yes.
yeah.
Talk about that, James.
And it's so essential. Like we talk about, like if you're stretching your skin, you're adding 70, 80 pounds. Whenever you're
Yeah,
younger and we talk about sort of collagen and how the skin can kind of reset and have that sort of
yeah,
tight as a drum look, the more that you do these things, the skin eventually will not reset. We end up with sort of stretch marks, which will
yeah,
give effective visuals as well. So these are things that we like. This is a sport that we're being critiqued on how we look. It's not just about building
yeah,
muscle, skin
yeah,
texture. I've had to give feedback to somebody, about the sort of skin, like it's loose skin, and you don't want to be that critical with somebody. But whenever it's between that person and somebody else that doesn't have those symptoms, then generally that person of all else is equal. That other person with a tighter skin would
yeah.
win.
And
Um,
that's the exclusivity element of bodybuilding there.
yeah,
It's not inclusive.
that's
And do
right.
you know what? There's a contest that happens in Ukraine, and bless David Brigger for doing this 4 years in a row now with the Ukraine war going on. So props to him that he still runs WNBF Ukraine contest because I think that's a great thing that he does. His contest is called the Mr. Perfect contest.
Yeah,
And that stayed with me because I was like, yeah, we want the perfect man or woman. That's what we're looking for.
yeah,
Skin matters.
yeah. The other thing I talk about, there is a biological thing. I've definitely read literature on this before, and like I can remember the first time my mum seen me dieting for a show, she hated it because
Mhm.
I looked ill. There's this internal biological alarm in a mother whenever she sees her son
Oh,
looking
yeah,
malnutrition, right?
yeah,
It's almost like these sirens are going off in the brain. But we all have those mechanisms whenever we assess ourselves too. The problem I see with bodybuilding, it gives masks and capes to disorders and
yes,
nutritional dysfunction, and it gives it justification. So I'm justified in being overweight, obese. Let's call a spade, obese, overweight,
yes,
unhealthier than I have the potential to be in that
yes,
moment. And it's all under the guise of gaining, as you said, that 2 pound more muscle for 60, 50, 60 pounds
oh,
more
it's
weight.
nonsense.
So there's that side. I say to my clients, your face will tell me. I don't even need to look at if I've seen you going through prep, I don't need to look at your physique to know whenever you're in the bracket. In my opinion, your optimal bracket for muscle gain, because the face will tell the story. And we tend to sort of move in this sort of pendulum like with two distinctive ends. One, we look malnutritioned facially, sunken in. I look like
Yeah,
hell. And but you need to look like that to walk on stage.
yeah,
And then so in order to get there, we actually bypass where facially we look healthiest, and people will comment in the gym, people that know you, oh, you look really well, because they see it, because they've seen you looking at the other extremes. And then what we do is we come out of the competition phase, and in the pursuit of that other 2 pounds of muscle tissue, we bypass that perfect facial bracket and end up going more towards the fat, plumpy, inflamed look. So we're spending maybe a couple of weeks on each journey on the way down in the actual perfect spot where biologically we're probably functioning best. And then we're
yeah,
bypassing it on the way up in the pursuit of
yeah.
weight gain. What do you think about that?
No, do you know what? You're you're 100% right, and you remind me of two things, and I'll tackle them one by one. One is fat set points. The second is body dysmorphic disorder.
Yeah,
And the third thing I'll say is there are some well-known fitness influencers in the natural world who are just fat.
yeah,
They look like shit. And they get and you know what? They're lightweights.
yeah.
And when I say lightweights, I mean they're not heavy on stage, but they so maybe 70 kilograms, 72 kilograms, but they're probably walking about 95 kilos. And they
Mm,
look fat.
yeah,
Yeah. Now, just two things. I'll tackle these one by one, right? One of the consequences of being really large, right, is your fat cells, adipocytes we call them, right? That's a fat cell, have got a storage capacity for lipid. Lipid is the energy source, right? Fat, right? So they will store lipid, right? And it works like a fuel tank, right? You've got so many adipocytes and they store the lipid. Now, when you deplete the lipid, they send a signal to your brain called leptin that says, fill us back up, right? We want to be full again. And your body is a survival organism, right? Once you get to a certain size and a certain level of lipid, it wants to return to that size again. So if you were maybe 90 kilograms holding fat, then you do your off season, you go 95 kilograms, and then you diet all off, it wants to get back to 95 kilograms. And then if you go to 100 kilograms, it wants to get back to 100 kilograms. And this is one of the reasons why people really struggle to get weight off, because they lose all the weight and then your body goes, no, get back to the weight you were, because you've got such strong hunger signals that are telling the body to go and eat again, right? So one of the consequences of getting really fat is you keep going back to that weight you were at before because you want to return to that because that's what your body's doing. You need to spend a significant amount of time below that previous weight. So if you're 100 kilograms, to make it easy, you need to be at 190 kilos for, say, 6 months to 2 years for your body to go, okay, this is our new set point.
Yeah.
And you experience that when you diet, James. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've experienced it whereby you struggle with the diet going from, say, I don't know, 80 kilograms to 75 kilograms. But once you've been there for, say, 4 months, you've no longer got the same level of hunger. Your body's reset mindset, right? So that's what's going on there. So that's a major, major danger on there. Right. On the other things that you said, I couldn't help but think, right? Bodybuilding does attract characters of extremes.
Yeah.
You're totally, totally right. Totally, totally right. And it masks conditions.
Yeah.
Body dysmorphic disorder is the notion of an inability to be objective about what you're seeing potentially in the mirror. That's a very simplified explanation of what it is, right? Or the other way we describe it is the Adonis complex, right? You look in the mirror and you don't see what's looking back at you. I think there's a large proportion, no pun intended, of guys that are bulking up and getting fat that are actually got body dysmorphic disorder.
Yeah.
Like they are frightened to be small within their body and they are masking by doing this bulking particular aspect. I think that is potentially going on. And I've been doing research on this, right? And I think you'll like this. So, loosely speaking, from the research that I have done, surveying bodybuilders, getting them to fill out personality questionnaires, getting them to fill out body dysmorphic disorder questionnaires, getting them to fill out eating disorder questionnaires on over 300 participants, you can potentially subdivide bodybuilders into three different types of archetype, right? And you'll really like this because I sent you this before. So there are three sort of different archetypes, right? You've got people who are high appearance and body image concern, moderate body dissatisfaction and concern, and then you've got people who are low engagement, low concern. And I would say you're probably in this kind of category. I'm in this category, probably maybe venturing into this category here as well. But as soon as I show you the images, you've seen these guys and girls.
Yeah.
So this is someone who's got a high appearance concern, would be concerned about themselves being either not lean enough or not big enough. So they're bulking. That's your guy who wants to add 60 pounds of fat to add the 2 pounds of muscle because he's not being objective. He's not being rational in any way at all. So they've got a strong desire to change their aesthetic, anxiety about specific body part, like seeking out lots of dietary supplements which don't necessarily do anything, looking for an edge, stressed out, concerned about their weight, image, tendency towards modification, thinks about undergoing surgery, maxing anesthetic procedures. So you've got people like this. Then you've got people who are in this kind of category. This is probably a lot of people. Moderate levels of concern, dissatisfaction with their body image, and appearance. May have some tendencies towards anxiety, but less extreme. Some dissatisfaction with features, but less extreme behaviors. But you really want to be working with people like this, who are like comfortable with having a pizza, not fully overly anxious all the sort of time, or concerned with their body image to the point that they want to gain that 6 pounds of fat, or stay completely lean all year round without the ability to even come out of that recovery stage from here, and that they can lead happy and well adjusted lives. And I think what you're seeing with people who are getting really fat and really big, etc., is you're not necessarily seeing people who are in this frame of mind. You're moving towards this sort of
Yeah.
place here where they're just incredibly anxious. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I think that explains a lot of the behavior.
Yeah, no, I think that sums it up perfect. The thing that we would talk about, most people from the outside, and even if we look at it ourselves as people that are active within this sport, is it's a sport of vanity on some level.
Yeah,
And what really sort of makes it a little bit weird is that we're in pursuit of perfection. We spend 90% of our time at opposite ends of those extremes. For me, something I sort of thought coaching a lot of people as well. I think like the sweet spot for meals, for a lot of my meals, are in around sort of between 9.5 to 12 kilo above stage is a
yeah,
good upper limit, I think, where
yeah,
you're still holding good composition. You're more than likely in a good hormonal environment position to be able to accrue as much muscle tissue as you possibly can. And
yeah,
you're not sabotaging your look. Because what we need to understand as well, guys, is like me and Edel's been together 15 years. Like if we're going out for dinner, I want to make myself look nice for her. You know, as
yeah,
cheesy as that sounds, I'm not going to make myself hideous and then like if you've started going with a girl for 5 months and you make yourself hideous and she decides to go with another guy, it's your fault on some level because
no. I'm with you, because what
you
you're
know what I
talking
mean.
about there is you're talking about self-esteem.
Self-esteem.
Talking about self-esteem, and then you're talking about a partner who's got self-esteem as well. But you're also talking about mating behaviors.
Yeah,
And in the animal kingdom and in the human mating behaviors, what typically happens is, unsurprisingly, the fives go out with the fives, and the sevens go out with the sevens, and the sixes go out with sixes, and the eights and nines. And so you match with your spouse on your level.
yeah,
So if you go from being a 10 to a 4, then a 10 doesn't want to, as a passing on the genes and the strategy. And that's
yeah,
just stark reality, whether you like that news or not. And just to, again, getting away from this, incel culture kind of interests me, because you got to realize, like, you've got to make yourself worth something for someone to want to go out with you,
yeah,
right? You
yeah,
have to have you've got to bring something to the table as a man, because mating selection is reversed in humans compared to animal kingdom, whereby the male might choose in a scenario like, I don't know, where you've got a harem with deer. Anyway, sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I was described as a polymath the other day, and I thought that was a great compliment. I was like, thank you very much. It means I know a little about, or a lot about, a
a little bit, a
lot.
lot of things.
Yeah, I did. So you're like, where do you get this stuff, Andrew? Like, oh, well, I know about this. I've read about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to make yourself look nice for
Yeah,
your partner.
it's something that I think as a coach, you're almost like mentoring a lot of clients. Whenever I'm dealing with other guys as well, like whenever if like me, if I'm working in the gym, I'm not like you walking around with smokers jackets at work and shit, right? So
I am walking about like that.
right, but so me, Edel and I, we own a gym. We're walking around in like sweats and slacks all the time.
Sure.
If you combine that then with I've piled on 55 pounds more than I should have piled on. you're just setting yourself up to be hideous, and then it will affect your self-esteem potentially, and then how you conduct yourself with people. All those things are going to be influenced as well. So even though we take out the training components of optimal and what that means, if we look at just you performing well, making your feeling pride in your appearance. So as I said, if I found this year that my bracket where I felt like I visibly looked really good and possible was in around that 76.8 to 79 kilo. Facially, I looked good. I still had fairly good detail across my physique, but I had still enough body fat where I was performing really well on all fronts, and hormonally was in a good spot, which if hormonally you're in a good spot, that's also going to be beneficial for your relationship, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, I was just about to ask you a personal question. How's your sex drive?
Yeah, well, as I said, like,
because you've got to be able to perform, right?
yeah, off season, absolutely fine. We understand as you go through prep, depending on the extreme again,
Yeah.
those can sort of drop off. But again, good habits. If you haven't gained 70 pounds, you're probably going to feel better through prep. I still actually, I feel like I'm still sitting in a really good spot in terms of libido as well. And that's after 13, 14 weeks, I think, of prep so far. Maybe a wee bit more. So I think it's how you manage those things. If I've only 10 to 12 kilo to lose, you're probably not going to go through the same things as somebody that's got 30 kilo to lose.
Oh yeah, 100%. And some
Yeah.
people, the classic mistake they make is that they do the first show, they gain a whole lot of fat without rebounding in the face, and then they're in worse shape the next year because they're in a worse position from the off season starting point they had the year before. There's a few things I wrote down here in terms of consequences and side effects of being too large. One that I missed, obviously, your libido hormones just get out of whack. Your sex drive goes from here. But one thing you mentioned when you're going through this, right, is you're talking about bodybuilding being a sport of extremes, right? You said you think about it and you look at it sometimes and you think about the extremes and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And what you're doing with that there, right, is that is something that psychologists call metacognition
Yeah.
or insight. So you're thinking about your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I recall speaking to my sister who's a social worker. She said to me, she's like, Andrew, that's quite an advanced skill. Believe it or not. Not a lot of people think about their own thinking, right?
Mm.
And that's why I know you're in one of the lower categories for body image dissatisfaction stuff because you're thinking about your behavior
Yeah.
as being, although this is I'm not adjusted here. I need to think about this from here, yeah. And your man that's gaining all that weight, doing all that sort of stuff, and is tunnel, they're not thinking about their thinking. They
Yeah.
don't. It, some of it is a lack of training because you can train these things.
Yeah.
And some of it is lower IQ.
Yeah.
And
I agree with that.
that's what that is.
Yeah.
That's what that is from there. James, this has all been fascinating stuff. We could probably do one more question, maybe a quick fire one or two, because we've chatted about a lot of great stuff here.
I think if we can keep like a short question, we could maybe use this as a like cliffhanger. So we could probably start the conversation with this topic or finish this podcast with this topic and then start the next podcast episode with this topic because there's multiple bits of it as well.